In the dead of night, when the moon is high and ill winds blow, and the banshees cry and the moonlight casts an unearthly glow, arise, my love, with tales of woe.
Good evening. It is 12 midnight, the paranormal hour. Welcome to Ghost to Ghost. I'm your host, Chief Lawson. Ghost to Ghost is a podcast to discuss all paranormal and parapsychology subjects. You can find Ghost to Ghost on all major formats, so tell your friends, tell your family. Come listen to Ghost to Ghost. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is that time again for Ghost to Ghost. Tonight's topic, the Vollrath and the Gaslight Bar. These are two establishments that have a really rich background. Tonight's co-host is Jennifer Verne, research manager and podcast producer.
Good evening.
And Heather Lawson, case manager and podcast director.
Hello.
Our special guest tonight, which we have a interview with, is Brian Alvey, and we'll get to that here shortly. Jennifer, did you ever heard about the Vollrath before it became a subject matter here?
No, I had not heard of the Vollrath or the Gaslight Inn until joining Spirit. So.
Heather?
No.
Well,
I'm not from around here. So.
No, you're not.
I knew you didn't, but I felt it was only fair to ask you the question since I asked it to Jennifer as well. Anyway, yeah, it's a neat downtown establishment, and of course it's not there now, and I'm trying to find out what is. I believe it's just boarded up in a vacant building at this point. And I may have to drive over by there when I get the first chance and see.
Now, I've seen pictures of the Gaslight Inn, but I don't know that I've seen a picture of the Vollrath yet.
Gaslight is boarded up, and it is same as the Vollrath, I'm sure. And you know, this has a little bit of attachment to us because me and Eddie, the retired co-founder, wanted to buy this facility. And we were working with Brian Alvey at the time, considering whether we wanted to buy it or not. We were looking at it. And at that time, this venue had went from this friendly neighborhood German, cafeteria bar.
That would definitely be down on that side of town, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that whole area was German Catholic.
Yeah.
And a little bit more to the west and south were Irish Catholic. So you had the two areas, but the thing in common were they're Catholic. You had Sacred Heart Church right there. And that the whole area was called Sacred Heart. Used to, if you were living in downtown Indianapolis in the 20s and 30s, they described areas as Sacred Heart, or that because that was the nearest Catholic church in that area.
Right. Yeah.
So I tell you what, why don't you start it off a little bit with the history of the Vollrath, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So the Vollrath opened in 1926, and it closed October 29th of 2011. And as you said, it's the downtown south side in the Concord district. Mm-hmm. It's just one block east of Sacred Heart Catholic Church, really kind of neighbors. And I guess the Vollrath and the church had a good neighbor relationship.
Yeah,
and
we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
Being a Catholic, I can understand what that relationship is all about.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very time warp almost because it's reminiscent of a Chicago-style tavern. During Prohibition, which until it was outlawed in 1933, right, overturned in 1933.
Yes.
The Vollrath operated as a speakeasy, which most establishments at that time did.
Yes.
So they would have had dinners and dinner services and things like that, luncheons.
They kind of turned into a cafe. A lot of them did.
Yeah,
they didn't have a choice. Yeah,
right. Above board, you'd have
dance halls and what they could.
And dinners.
Yeah.
And then below ground, you'd have your speakeasies and probably other doors that you can enter for other entertainment.
Oh yeah. Actually, the Vollrath had an active, and I don't guess any of us discussed, including Brian, when it began, but we believe it was there shortly after conception. It had a full working brothel downstairs. Now it also had other rooms, but it had a brothel room.
Yeah. And I guess there were also possibly tunnels, you said, connected.
At one time, it was the belief that there was a tunnel going, well, actually, there was several tunnels and several passageways out of the bar.
As there usually are.
Oh, yeah. and part of that is to do prohibition. The other half dealt with people who visited there
and didn't want to be seen.
And did not want to be seen, have a quick getaway.
But as we were talking, it's highly likely that deliveries could have been made to the church and then brought down through the tunnel.
Exactly.
To be used in the speakeasy.
Very easily could have, and church deliveries
and
wouldn't be
uncommon.
Scrutinized. No. That wasn't during that period of time.
No.
One of the weird things when I studied Prohibition, I didn't know about, there was still production of alcohol during that period of time. It was used for medicinal purposes.
Medicinal?
Yep. Yes. Thank you. I missed the word, didn't I? I said, yeah. I don't know what I've been reading lately. Anyway, but yes, and
or drinking.
Yeah. Well, and so they allowed
for medicinal purposes.
Yeah,
medicinal purposes.
That's right. Isn't it what if you ever watch any of the old shows, there's some little lady and she always drags down a little flask.
Yeah.
And they go, "What is that?" And they go, "It's strictly for medicinal purposes."
Yes.
And
medicine.
Exactly.
Yeah. And but it actually there were some distilleries that produced because they were allowed to. They had government permit.
Right.
And there was something that came up. I can't remember the name of the document, but it turned out one of the distilleries were producing the President of the United States liquor during Prohibition.
Yes.
And he was having it brought in. But, there was several of them. And, if you knew a doctor could prescribe it, you were legal.
Right.
And so they could get it. And then, of course, you had so many more like the Vollrath and other places and individuals that made, your bathroom cocktails, made them in the bathtub.
That's why it's called bathroom gin.
Oh, yeah.
Or bathtub gin.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
So, of course, anytime that speakeasies or prohibition comes up, whose names come up?
Yep, and the two most famous probably
the
of
two
all.
most ubiquitous.
Yeah, because
John Dillinger and Al Capone.
Yep, and they both traveled through this area. A lot of people didn't realize
Absolutely.
we had gangsters here, but they were all part of other families.
Well, Dillinger had families south of here in Morgan County.
Yep,
and
Martinsville.
his base was in Chicago, so he came through quite frequently.
Yep, he hid. There was two different family members, one here in Martinsville, and the other one actually lived over off Hunter Road here in Indiana. And a lot of people didn't know about it. He could hide there.
Nice.
In between things and jobs and so forth. And then Capone, this was his vacation resort. He most especially liked the hot springs down at the French Lick. Yeah. He loved baiting all together, and that was where he liked to go to, but he would stop here on his travels back to Chicago. Now, remember, we're talking Model A. You're talking probably an 8-hour from Indy to Chicago or more.
Studebakers.
Yeah, Studebakers.
Oh, my favorite 1940s car is a Studebaker. I
got the running boards and the flared fenders.
Absolutely.
And, any automotive enthusiast would say they have the most really character is in the roasters in the 1920s and 40s up through the 40s. Because after then, after the 50s at the most, you start...
50s are pretty cool, but they're starting to be more... I don't want to say racer, but sporty looking.
Muscle cars, yeah.
In the 1940s, they were just glamorous cars.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And they had more features to them than what you would think of today for a car of that nature.
Okay. Yes, this is a tangent.
No, but go ahead.
Stick with us, guys. I saw a video on Facebook, TikTok, wherever, of a stroller that is attached to the car.
Yes.
It comes... I'm like, what the freak?
Well,
and then the tires of this other car would actually rotate so you can parallel park.
Yes.
And then the tires went back in again. I'm like, what happened to all these inventions?
Well, actually, Chevy, I think it's Chevy, Ford never did, but Chevy made that very axle where you can parallel park a car and it actually turns all four wheels.
Yes.
And but that was actually done, and I don't believe it's Studebaker. I believe the one that did that was... there's a museum in Metamora, Indiana, and I'm trying to think of what it was one of the more expensive cars, but it had it. A lot of the cars had, a buddy of mine collects these cars. He has a American La France car, and people will go, well, I've never heard of that. Yeah. Well, you probably wouldn't unless you're a fireman. The most expensive, and there for years, the leader of all fire engine manufacturers was American La France. And they made aerial ladders, almost everything Chicago drove for years was American La France. They briefly made a car, and it had a built-in record player in the back. It had this trunk, leather-coated trunk, and you opened it up, and it had a built-in record player that was, wind up, and then you had a complete... When you bought a car, it came with the tool set. It wasn't like today where, if you want to work on it, you go down at Sears or wherever. Well, Sears is hard to find.
They don't even come with a spare tire.
No, most of them come with a spare tire. The Duesenberg was the one. Duesenberg. That was the one that, and they would have, that was one of the first cars to have a wired-in cigarette lighter. For the women in the back, it came off a wire, and it was just a hot plate, similar to like the cigarette lighters we had at one time. It would heat up, and they could light their cigarette, which usually had them on a holder.
You mean the ones we burned our fingertips off of?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Or the carpet of your mother's car?
Yeah, or the glove box where it ate the title.
I'm surprised I still have fingerprints.
Oh, yeah. Jeez.
I can tell you some funny stories about that, but we get way off track. Anyway, it
always get off track. Knows how old we are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They didn't
all the different things. Yeah, because some of those would pop out when you least expect it. They weren't supposed to pop to the edge of the thing where you grab them. Some of those would shoot up like a water rocket. It was a load of fun catching that when I was on.
Yeah, not good.
But anyway,
so
they had a lot of things back then.
Yeah, so Dillinger and Capone, and Dillinger kind of preferred the Vollrath over the Gaslight, so I've been told.
Yep.
And Capone, while he was the Vollrath, often, evidently, the Gaslight maybe was his preference. Now, I don't know. Maybe Dillinger and Capone didn't like to be in the same place together. So if Dillinger was there, Capone may have gone over the Gaslight and vice versa.
It's a funny thing. We always laugh, and the only way I can relate this to, in Freemasonry, during the Revolutionary War, there were several lodges where both American soldiers and British soldiers attended because they were Freemasons first and foremost. So they attended a truce, if you will, while they were there in lodge.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of the same thing. Dillinger, we talk a little bit about this when we talk with Brian Albee. Dillinger had his own way of doing things, and, that's what kept him from getting caught. And he was kind of a rock star. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even the sheriff that caught him from the county north that he escaped from posed with pictures.
Yeah.
Now, back then, these were not something easily come by. You'd have to get a photographer somewhere with a tintype to come in and pose with this, and he posed with him, out front because he wanted a picture of Dillinger standing there. So, I mean, this is kind of the Robin Hood of the age, and, it was always known that when Dillinger robbed a bank, he never took the money of the customer standing there. He only took the bank's money. Everybody else, they kept their money. At least that's what I was always told. So I'm sure I'll get some corrections. But anyway,
what, you weren't around back then?
No. Didn't even ride the dinosaurs. I always tell my kids that.
You mean your world wasn't in black and white?
Yeah. I remember Reagan one time. Ronald Reagan made a speech and he said something about, Abraham Lincoln. He says, just for my friends in the press, he said, I want you to know, he says, I wasn't there at the time. And that's the same way here. I really wasn't there at the time, But
if you had been there with Dillinger,
yes,
you would have cozied up to a carved African mahogany bar.
It's beautiful, and it was still there when we were looking at buying it.
Oh,
it was gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
They treat it with beeswax. I mean, it was one of the most. I've got some pictures. I'll show you.
We'll have to put them on the Facebook page.
Yes, I thought we would because
yes.
I mean these are some beautiful shots. It actually had inlaid on the door because the door coming in was a corner door. It was right there at the corner of Palmer and Talbot, and in the floor it had inlaid mosaic tile spelling out the words Vollrath. And it was still there at least when I left left that area. And I think Brian, he finally did give it up. Went to a catering company, and then after that, we don't know what happened past that point.
Yeah.
But I mean, you were in a very cozy. The bar, it was not light. It was a darker colored bar, and you got to remember from Prohibition days. Here it was a speakeasy in the back and a restaurant in the front. Well, then it converted and it stayed kind of a neighborhood, which all those bars were neighborhood bars.
Well, yeah, they were neighborhood bars, but then in the 1960s, I guess, when the interstates came through, we had an issue, didn't we? Because I-65 and I-70 cut that neighborhood off.
Yeah.
And the flow of traffic stopped.
And that really hurt because this is not on a main drag.
No.
You remember. Yeah.
And that's what's going to happen on the north side of Indianapolis now.
Yeah.
This happens to a lot of places.
Well, it did when they
redid all that and took all the exits off on the north side of the downtown.
Yes.
And those businesses there are really going to struggle. And
they
they're
did
really
the same
upset.
thing when they were going to...
Is it Leon Tailoring or is it Stutz Tailoring?
No, it's Leon's.
Leon's.
Yeah, he actually is in... I know him. He's in the Shrine Lodge.
Yeah.
And I know his son who runs it. And I tell you what, that's going to hurt big time.
Yeah.
And they weren't... years ago, if you were a Shriner, you went to Leon's to get your tux. That's where all the tux... I've got two tuxes that came... There was two guys in town. Tommy Tuxedo, and you had Leon's, and I've got 2 tuxes that are Leon specials. He was the last time I was in and Leon is not his name. I'm sitting here, can't think of Dave. Last time I was in a meeting with him was the Rebel Club before it folded at Miraw, and I mean they made some quality suits. They were worth the money. The tuxedos were fantastic. I have a special Shrine one that came from there with Shrine material. But anyway, yeah, I mean, the same thing happened on the way to Evansville. If you go down 37, which is not 37 now, it's 69, they do have exits, but there's a lot of stuff that was roadside that you can't get to now.
Yeah, exactly. That happens.
Same thing's going to happen there.
So I guess it became a local biker bar.
It was for a period of time.
And then did Dee Cowitz own it when it was the biker bar?
She did, is my understanding. She had it all the way up to where Brian bought it. And,
okay. So she was the owner in the...
Yeah, she decided to retire,
in the 60s.
and she had it still as a bar. Now, Brian is kind of a local version of John Tapper and Bar Rescue. He could go into a facility and do a really good job.
Oh, nice.
And so he got a hold of it and said, I want to keep the mahogany, I want to keep the bar, I want to keep that neighborhood feel, but at the same time, I can't manage a bar and keep a bar that way.
Right.
Now, in that area at the time, there was a Gaslight, the Vollrath, the Meridian Street Bar, you had Brannigan's, and then you had CK's, and that was about it. That was your neighborhood bar. So they're all competing for a chunk of this action.
Right.
So what he did was, in 07, he got rid of the biker bar, and he got rid of the clientele, and it took him a while to push those out of there. He basically turned it into a music venue. He brought the pool tables in. He pushed into some apartments there and got rid of those on the side. Well, actually, they were businesses. For a long time, when you came to that bar, the Vollrath had a corner, but on the ends, on the first floor, were businesses, tailors, things like that. So when those businesses went, he just absorbed that. They were gone anyway at the time he got it. They absorbed that in. He had pool tables. He brought in a stage with full lighting, all the sound systems.
Into that tiny building?
Yes. And to see it was kind of unique because the bar was L-shaped. You came in on the corner of the L. So if you went left, there was the bar,
I can
the back
see it.
bar, and then you had the stage at the end. Okay, the whole back end, it was nothing but stage. Then if you went right, you had 2 or 3 pool tables, and you had more seating.
Okay, so the Vollrath was larger than the Gaslight.
It was a lot larger than the Gaslight.
Okay, because I'm picturing the Gaslight, and for those of you who can see our pictures on Facebook, you can see how small and narrow the Gaslight looks.
Yes.
So that's what I had envisioned of Vollrath, but it's going to be a bit bigger
lot larger.
It's he absorbed all the other.
It was probably 3,000 square feet at one point.
Okay.
I mean, it was good size, and luckily I was old enough that I was into both of them before they closed. I did drink at the Gaslight a couple nights just to see what it was like, and I do want to say neither Dillinger nor Vollrath or neither Al Capone were there. Anyway, but we did get a chance to look at it in its heyday. Brannigan's before it reopened. Fantastic setup. I mean, they did a lot better with it. A lot of those have been saved, but some haven't. The Vollrath and Gaslight went the wayside, but it goes back to that old saying, if you don't change, you're doomed to fail. Right. You have to change to stay with the time. So Brian seen this, and he went into it, and he had a terrible struggle, as we'll talk about in the interview, because there's 3 godfathers of music, and of course BMG's one, and everybody wants their cut if you do any kind of cover work or you bring in any legendary bands, and they're horrible to deal with, and they want monthly payments, and that's the first thing that me and Ed looked at when we looked at it. That was one of our big drawbacks, because we wanted to run a bar business, we didn't want to run a music business, and these people wanted, $500-$600 a month for us playing covers, or even we were just playing them in the jukebox. We had to have a license.
Really?
And, they wanted their cut.
Happens. Well,
they did. It doesn't in all ways, because I tell you what, there's a lot of bars out there that when they buy a jukebox off a company that sells it, the company then takes care of all the rights and the BMI and all that people they handle, so they don't get zapped with it now. But back in the day, you did get zapped with it. Even if you bought, the only way around that was a lot of bar owners bought a jukebox that played 45s. And they purchased the 45. When you buy the music, you're buying the royalty built into it. So then they take it to the bar and they can play it all they wanted. But every time it played off a commercial jukebox or a cover band played it, you had to pay, not the band, but you as the establishment had to pay for that fee. And so he went strictly to all first-time songwriters, which was great because he got a ton of people from that area. People came down from Broad Ripple, from Fountain Square, anywhere around that had artists. They started migrating in because he wanted first-time musicians, so he didn't have to pay that. it worked out really, really well. I mean, he built up quite a setup with first-time songwriters and singer-songwriters. I mean, that's always. I mean, how many people have made it to fame being singer-songwriters? I can sit here and think of a ton of them, especially in the '60s.
Lionel Richie.
Oh yeah, exactly. There's a good example.
Yeah.
Jim Croce. I mean, these are people that wrote their songs and got them out there. So the bar really did do really, really well.
So now that we've done all this,
yes.
Who's haunting it?
Well, that's a good question.
What's going on?
And even when I interviewed Brian, because we talked about this many nights. Him and I and Ed would sit there and talk about the things that were on. And he was gone when he was deployed at the time. His bar manager had to run it, and she passed away recently, is my understanding, within the last couple of years of cancer. And she was very sweet. And we would talk to her, and she would tell us about these things that happen. The funny thing is, to the best of our knowledge, there has not been a death there that we know of, okay?
So once again,
yeah.
Nobody has to die in a location for there to be hauntings.
And so that's one thing we can look at. It's not there. We wonder sometimes if it's some of the performers, or the problem is everybody that did it, and we actually went in and did an investigation off the books, me and Ed did one night, and Alvy just gave us the keys and let's go in. And we got nothing. Very little, few EVPs. I mean, a handful of things, not enough to constitute a haunting. We never could quite figure out, who was haunting it. Now, I kind of halfway wonder, and this is an opinion, only speculation, if it wasn't some of the patrons that loved that bar.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
I mean, you take the German community was there, because Cons meats, and I'm not doing a commercial for Cons, but up on Meridian, not unless they pay us, Anyway, Cons Meats has some of the best meats in the world. Me and Heather go there, we get some all the time. They've recently bought commercial smokers, and are even smoking some. But they supplied a lot of meat to the area, especially, I'm sure, to the Vollrath. Some of those people would come there for breakfast. And you'll see this right now. If you want to see this right now in that same kind of manner, go up to Pendleton Pike, go to the Heidelberg Cafe.
Right.
And Jurgen, he's turned that to his daughter and his son-in-law. And Jurgen's still in there occasionally. And Jurgen's a good man. I always enjoy talking with him. And so anyway, but that is a good example. People will come in there. If you're in around 8 or 9 in the morning, the German older people will come in and eat their breakfast there and drink their coffee.
Yeah.
And they visit with everybody. That's a big thing. And this is my mind's eye and vision of the Vollrath.
Right.
So I'm wondering if some of these folks didn't just, they belong there and that's where they stayed.
Come back for breakfast.
Well, I mean,
that was their community. That was their neighborhood.
It was.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was their hangout. Birthday parties were held there, and the priest drank there,
So is Brian going to give us some insight as to what's going on?
He is. In the next interview here, we're going to be talking with Brian for just a minute or two, and he's going to kind of go over some of the things he's seen, some of the paranormal things. But the one thing that we noticed a lot was that, or at least was reported to us a lot, was noises. Usually stuff from the basement when no one was there. Mm-hmm. Now, this is generally during cleanup time, so the patrons are gone. Bartender, barback, maybe manager, maybe not even that many there. And I know the bar manager told me that she always made sure she went downstairs with the barback or whoever she had there to turn the lights off together. If they didn't, they stayed on till the next morning because she didn't.
Because she wasn't going down.
She wasn't going down.
I'm not going down there.
And there was doors that closed. There was a lot of different reports, but in the long term of things, I don't think we ever really, it's the same thing with the gaslight. We never could quite, other than the fact, say, hey, maybe these are patrons, maybe these are workers that have come back that really have an attachment here. And it's kind of like some Masonic buildings. I always said I don't want anybody running crazy with this, but, we always say the Scottish Rite is bound to be haunted. There's been some things that have happened, but, that many men over a period from 1922 to now, that's 100 years, you guarantee
when you have fellowship, camaraderie, and friendship going on,
it's going to happen.
Yeah.
People are going to come back to it. I had a brother once tell me, I asked him, I said, I don't understand with this connection with the lodge. He says, well, you're a member of the lodge. You love this building. I said, yeah, but I don't want to come back to it. He said, they're all hiding from their wives. If they come here, they're not there. And he said they did it in life too. And I don't know. I'm just saying it's a possibility. Now, one thing that I don't think even Brian knew was in '82 there was an interesting little thing that popped up here. This is pretty rough. So I'm going to warn you. This is a little bit of a disturbing story. In 1982, there was a sting operation conducted at the Vollrath. Sam Lucky Cardabone Jr., was arrested for selling 2 illegal handguns to undercover Indianapolis State Police officers. Why was this important? Well, Capone was convicted of killing a female dancer named Diana Lynn Ingram. Along with an accomplice, they kidnapped her, took her to a soybean field in Fall Creek Township. She was sodomized and eventually shot in the head by Capone, and her body was dumped in the field. He was sentenced to 80 years in prison after this murder.
So this sting captured him.
Yes.
And then he was connected to the murder.
And they were able to connect him back with the guns.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, they set it up to get him.
Oh,
yeah.
Awful.
And who's to say?
They caught him. Yeah. They caught him.
I don't think she's there. I mean, there again, that's a matter of opinion. But I think that there's a good chance that there could have been a lot of people shot or killed there that never made the books. I mean, when you've got 3 ways out of the main bar and 2 ways out of the basement, one of them went up into one of the apartments, and the apartments there was a master suite section above the actual bar. And I remember when we were touring this, because this was going to be me and Ed's apartment. It had a window that viewed the stairwell. So if someone came up the stairwell, a guard at the top of the stairwell could take them out with this drop hole that had like a drop port window where they could fire through and engage someone on the stairs. It also had an escape route. Out of there, went down all the way from the second floor into the basement of the bar.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was a ton of ways out of that establishment.
Right,
so,
right.
Well, I tell you what, let's take a quick break. Let's let Brian Alvey entertain us a bit and explain a little bit about his tenure there and what the hauntings were that he saw at the Vollrath. So we'll be right back with you. Listeners, today we have a special guest, Brian Alvey, who is with us, and we are talking about the Vollrath. Now, Brian, when did you buy the Vollrath?
Gosh, what year was that? That would have been, I believe it's 06 or 07, somewhere in there. I checked at this point. All my dates just blur together in my life. So,
I know that feeling. As you get older, it doesn't get better.
Oh, I know, and it's the mileage that I'm most concerned with. So, all the things I've done in my life, I've taken a few shots to my head. So.
Oh yeah. Well, I'll tell you what though. If we were down at the VA hospital the other day, and the only good thing is you walk past, you find people that are worse off than you are, and you're thinking, okay, maybe I'm not so bad now. It's
I avoid that place like the plague.
We do too if we can. We certainly don't want that kind of help.
I kind of facetiously joke that I don't think half the people that work there can spell VA.
Yeah.
So I've had some bad experiences there.
So haven't we all? The last thing my dad said before he passed away, he always told me, he said, whatever happens, don't go to the VA. Make sure that you've always got insurance or money to go somewhere else. Don't ever go to the VA. He said that should be only a last resort.
Well, I was blessed with the fact that I retired from the Army, and I have obviously my health care that way. So TRICARE. Tell people all the time, I'd rather pay a copay than go to the VA.
Oh hell yeah, I get you. Well, now when you bought the Vollrath, and I know like I said, because I and Eddie was our retired co-founder of the group, and I know we were looking into it at the time to purchasing it. It was a neat place. I love the look of it. I love the feel of it, and its roots are German for that area, correct?
Correct. Louis Vollrath. He was a local architect, and he built that building. He lived in the I would call it condo directly above the bar.
Yes.
And then it had, I believe, there's 19 adjacent apartments in the building, with the cornerstone of the building being the Vollrath, and then a couple other rotating stores. There was a barber shop in there. There's quite a few different things over the years, which those spaces ended up just kind of being absorbed into the bar over time.
Yes. Now, the apartments, I remember there was something fascinating stuck in my mind when you were showing us the apartments. Upstairs, there was I'm going to let you take this over, but at the major apartment, or maybe the condo apartment we're talking about, there was above the bar, there was a special window where you could see who was coming up the stairs. You want to give us a little bit on that one?
Well, I always tell people there was about 11 ways out of that bar without having to crawl.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a staircase hidden in plain sight right in the middle of the bar.
Yes.
An L-shaped bar, so right in the crook of the L. That staircase led right up into his domain upstairs. That one did.
Mm-hmm.
So it was hidden right there. Kind of, if you remember going in there, because I had turned it, that old tavern, I turned it into a music venue.
Yes.
And, we supported live musical artists.
And you did really well because it was very popular.
Yeah, we did well. Without going into detail, the only reason that I closed her down, sold her, so to speak, was that, the Super Bowl came to Indy, and my liquor license had high demand on it. So.
Oh, yeah. That was a 3-way license. That was something they wanted.
Yeah. Old school, no food requirement.
Yes.
Or a percentage of sales. It was. Anyway, to move on for that, but I love the place. Well, so when I got it, I restored it to its original glory because it was in major distress when I got it. And but if you remember, like I said, it was shaped like an L, big L.
Yes.
So you walk in, it looked like a shotgun style bar.
Yes.
But then you get to the end, it turns right, it opens up with a stage on the far end, and it was just this amazing music haunt, pun intended. And we supported local artists. We got into a little bit of a disagreement with what I would call the three families of the music mafia, BMI, ASCAP, and CSAC, where I collectively paid all of them what they said I should pay them for playing one cover song in there.
Oh, God.
It would have equated to close to $10,000 a year. And it's just lunacy. That's a whole other story to talk about those folks, but I think they use and abuse artists and to blackmail and bribe. Venues.
I believe
that. Anyway, so I said, you know what? I don't need music. I like music. It really packs the place out. This has been a historic tavern since 1926 when it wasn't even called a tavern. It was called a cafe because I was in the heart of Prohibition.
Yes.
When they built it, the bar was literally downstairs, not upstairs in a sense.
Yeah, well, I think we got some pictures of when it was the cafe version, had tables and even tables outside on the sidewalk.
So I just said, you know what? We're doing original only. Can't play one cover song in here. That negates my obligation to those shysters.
Yes.
And everybody said, that's crazy, it won't work. I said, well, if it doesn't work, I don't care. But I think it will work because we had a booming local, budding music and artist community, and it just took off like a rocket. Within 3 months, I'm on the cover of Intake magazine in Indianapolis, and I've got the gurus in town going, how did you do this? And I'm like, well, just I don't know how I do it, I just do it. So
there you go. Well, now
worked out real well.
Tell me a little bit about the Al Capone era when he was coming there. What you know of that?
Well,
I mean, we know there was a brothel in the basement.
Story that I got about Al Capone. I had this older gentleman come in one day, older Italian man, just looking around. He was easily mid to late 80s, I would guess.
Okay.
He was kind of looking around in there and everything, and he had brought a woman with him. She just kind of followed him around quietly, didn't say anything. She looked to be about 20, 25 years younger than him, so I was assuming maybe a daughter or something, but he just kind of looking around, not saying anything, and I just let it. It was during the day, not a whole lot of people in there, and he's just peacefully looking around. And I was getting that quite a bit. Some of the old neighborhood, everything wanted to come to see how we had brought it back, because it was destined for closure finally. And then finally he sits down, he ordered a beer or something, and he had a Coke or something. And he said, and we got to talking, and he said, he spent 40 years, I believe he said 40 years as an IMPD officer, or as IPD back then.
Yes.
And he saw how he used to come in here way back in the day.
Yes.
And he talked about, and then he said, man, I've been retired as long as I was like, he'd been retired for a long time. So he said, I came in here back in the day, and he said that he came in one time, and he looked over in the corner, and there's a few guys sitting around a table, and one of which he said he recognized was Al Capone.
Oh, wow.
So I said, what'd you do? He says, I turned around and left. He said, I didn't need a burger that bad.
Wow.
And he said, and so he got to speaking about that. He said, that's why. He said, being in the Italian American community, in that back in that time frame, he said the reason why. And I don't know if this is true or not, but he shared something that made a lot of sense that kind of helped validate it for me. Is he said the reason why we don't historically have any sort of gangster mafia history in Indianapolis like all the other major towns did. Like
Sure.
Omaha, St. Louis, Detroit, Cleveland, obviously
all had
Chicago.
families. Yeah.
We didn't. Well, we did. The issue is, and this will lead into the other big thing about the Vollrath.
Yes.
Al Capone made Indianapolis off limits.
Oh.
Because this is where he'd send guys to go on the lam.
To
He
hide,
traveled through
yes.
here to get to Miami. He would stop in here. He'd had his meetings in Indianapolis because he wasn't really recognized like unless you knew down here that much. Between Indianapolis, a little town called Clinton, Indiana, just northeast of Terre Haute,
Yes.
which literally the streets are still red, white, and green, lined down the center. It's a very Italian community.
Oh, yes.
And then he also liked to go down to French Lick, West Baden, and all that stuff. But
yeah.
He labeled Indianapolis off limits, which that also tied into. Okay, so that makes sense for me.
Yeah, there are in our headquarters. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then that ties into what the Vollrath was really famous for, that John Dillinger used to hang out in it, like some of the other greatest, like the Noodle and
Gaslight, and
Gaslight and Dorman Street, and all these other cool bars that some have survived, some haven't. It was on his route, if you will, just his pub crawl, if you will, and there was an old Indie News, I think it was, article where IPD almost caught Dillinger in the Vollrath down in one of the rooms in the basement, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But he escaped out of a secret passage and got away.
Wow.
But if you remember, he was hitting the first bank he ever hit was over there close to Dorman Street on the Near East Side.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, he never hit anything in Indianapolis again. He left Indianapolis, Central, the whole area alone. He went on the road, because it was him, and then there was Babyface Nelson and all these other guys, robbing banks and doing everything. They stayed out of Indianapolis because back then, it didn't matter who you were. If you were in the criminal element, you still had to kick up to the boss of the city.
Well, sure. Yeah, whoever ran the territory.
Yep. So, and you had to get sanctioned and okayed on the things you did. So even those guys had to make sure they did what he said, didn't do what he didn't say, and kicked up.
Yes.
You had to pay your dues, so to speak.
Sure.
And that's why Dillinger, when he got eventually word got to him and said, "Hey, the boss isn't happy about that. You might want to stay out of Indy." And that's I don't know how that conversation ever came to fruition, but it clearly did, because all of a sudden, boom, never in Indianapolis again, his hometown. So
only bank.
But and that was a story that Al Capone, or excuse me, Dillinger used to hang out in the Vollrath all the time in the basement. So the basement had brothel rooms. Yeah,
I remember the numbers on the doors, because when we were looking, they still had the numbers on the doors.
My office was brothel room number 2 down there. The number was still on the door. That basement, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, had 6 staircases out of it.
Wow.
One that was in the center of the bar, and then a bunch of hidden ones. It had one that you went down the corridor, you turned up, there's a door right at the top of that staircase, little staircase. You go out that door, and it's in one of the apartment foyers, and it literally said janitor's closet on the outside of of that door. It led right into that basement. It was amazing.
Wow. Well, I remember one of the apartments up there. The staircase had a reverse window, and you could see and actually shoot anyone coming up, so you could defend that position very easily if they came up through the stairs. Yeah, he built a little fortress.
He had like a balcony all the way around one, and then it was it was being in the corner up there is very defensible. So I think Louis Vollrath, who built that and everything there, he was an entrepreneur in so many ways. Apparently he had one of the younger girls or something. I found out that one of the younger girls was kind of his girl, and he kind of took care of her, so she eventually moved from the basement up with him.
Sure.
And they're not going to document all this stuff. So a lot of this I got from the older people in the neighborhood.
Well, there's where your wealth of history is right there.
Yeah, but the problem is there wasn't a lot of those older folks left in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Because the reason why, so way back in the day, there were two spots for Catholics.
Yes.
The Protestant Catholics went to the Antoneum building, where the Rathskeller.
I like the way you say that, Protestant Catholics. That's very good. Go ahead.
Well,
That's true.
The Protestant Germans is what I'm going to say. The Catholic Germans, being one block to Sacred Heart Catholic Church, the German Catholic Church in Indianapolis, historically, which the Vollrath was one block from, they went to the Vollrath. The Vollrath was like one of the biggest, boomingest, funnest places to go in India.
Yeah, the heartbeat.
After, obviously, definitely after Prohibition, the Volstead Act repealed December 5th, 1931, I believe.
Yes.
And it turned into a regular bar in the 40s, the 50s, but the 60s. But what happened at the end of the 60s? They started cutting in I-65 and I-70.
Yes.
Made us, enhanced.
Indianapolis. Changed that whole area down there, though. The landscape.
It cut that neighborhood off. To you really, unless you know what you're doing, through a couple alleys, you can't get in and out of it, but from one or two directions.
Yes.
It really encapsulated that neighborhood, where the Vollrath went from being on a very prominent, high-traffic intersection. It was the dead end of the back of the neighborhood. It was no longer that. So it just slowly dwindled off. Along with that, all the older German families started moving out. You got to remember where it is. It's really close to the old Irish section.
Oh, yes.
Which was that was more the Fountain Square area at the time.
Yep.
You got
Bates Hendricks over there. Oh, yeah.
And then you go a little north where Lilly built up over 90% of it. You had Indianapolis's Italian neighborhood over there by Holy Rosary and everything in East Street. But anyway, it just cut the neighborhood, and so this houses started getting sold off, and some of them started to turn into rental properties.
Yes.
Well, the people that would rent them were all the people working on the interstate system.
Yes.
The labor. A lot of them came out of Kentucky. They came up. They worked. Well,
it was like chain gang of the railroad. They followed the work.
Yes. And mind you, there's a railroad that goes right through the back into that neighborhood too, which helped cut it off. So at any rate, the neighborhood just gets cut off. The historic families start they kind of sell it and moved out.
Sure.
Because and that's another thing. It was equal. It was very heavily Catholic German.
Yes.
And Jewish.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, think about it. Where's Shapiro's?
Exactly. Yeah, Shapiro's right up the road.
The first Indianapolis synagogue was in that area.
Oh.
Now, most of the Jewish population moved north over time.
Yes.
Also got out of the neighborhood, and they had a larger Jewish community up there and everything. But it was really cool, just as a sidebar to this whole thing. During World War II, through the 30s and the 40s, as a silent protest, and I know you're a traveling man, so you'll appreciate this story. The Masonic Lodge in that area, as a silent protest to the Nazis and all that they were doing, they would raise a worshipful master every year, as you're well aware.
Yes.
They would rotate it between a German and a Jew.
Really?
Yes.
Now, see, that's interesting, because I have not heard that.
Yeah, the Masonic Lodge stepped up as an example in that area of how we should be versus what was going on in the world at the moment. So about a 20-year period. So, well, all those folks moved out. Leaves there. Once the roads are done, all the people that were making probably a pretty decent wage working on it, they're gone. And that neighborhood just spiraled. By the time it hits the late 70s, it's getting worse. When it hit the 80s, the neighborhood is horrific. The 90s is bad.
Yes.
I mean, and just about the time, the reason why I bought it, the reason why I was in the neighborhood, it was just after the subprime disaster in this country, so there was a lot of really good properties on the sheriff's sale.
Sure.
That we were picking up and remodeling, rehabbing, and making better properties for investment portfolios. I was in the neighborhood looking at houses. I popped into this bar called the Vollrath because it was there, and I was hungry. And she didn't have any food but potato chips. And so I drank a Coke, and I sat there and talked to a little old lady by the name of Dee Cowitz.
Yes.
And she's sitting there, hi, how are you? I noticed really quickly, she didn't see real well.
Okay.
To the point, one of these, I call them neighborhood hood rats, come in.
Yes.
He wants to buy a little fifth of vodka or something for like $3 or something. And she sells it. And he hands her a $20 bill. She looks down, she looks down and looks up and she goes, "Is this a 20 or a 50? I can't see." So the light bulb goes over his head. He's about, I can see it in his face, he's about to say 50. But then he looks at me. And for your listeners, if you haven't looked at me, I look like a thumb. I don't look like the person. I don't look.
I don't see it that way. I've always seen you as just looking like one of us, one of the military. I mean, that, But,
I know, but I don't. Yeah. I don't look passive.
Everybody tells me I look like a cop, and I don't get like that either.
Yeah. I look like a meathead. So, and I look at him like you better not even think. He goes, 20. Yeah,
Good move, lad.
20. He sulked out. He thought he was going to make money, and. But anyway, I was like, and somehow that conversation quickly led, she needed to sell, blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
I literally agreed to terms to buy that place before I left.
Mm-hmm.
And because I love old architecture. I love history. I love all it. And I felt it. I fell in love with that bar because I just got this.
It's neat.
I got this amazing positive vibe out of that thing. So, long story short, I bought the thing. I rehabbed it over the course of about 3 months, and blew it open as a music venue to attract people. Pulled out all the nasty old pool tables and everything, and it exploded. Hugely popular. The mayor of Indianapolis at the time, Greg Ballard, came down to our big grand we never closed, so we didn't call it a grand reopening. We called it a grand, hey, we don't suck anymore. But, just all the local legislators would pop in there. It became kind of a who's who, cool spot to stop in. We still didn't have the highly intrusive smoking ordinance in place in Indy, so you could smoke your cigars in there, and you walked in there, and generally 98% of the time, everybody's just in a happy mood. When you walked in, everybody said hello to you.
Sure.
I mean,
Cheers. It was like a Cheers bar. Everybody knew everybody.
It really was. And we still had some of the locals there that just weren't. They were a negative influence. We slowly weeded them out. I would call them the can't get rights.
Oh yes.
And they just finally started to quit keeping it as an option to pop in. I mean, they would pop in a lot of times just out of morbid curiosity. It's like, what are all these people here for? Anyway, it just kind of slowed down and went away. But like I said, it just had such a positive energy in it. I sound like a hippie, but it is what it is.
No, that's true. I mean, you can get a lot. Some place that emits positive energy is going to bring more people in. There's no offense.
I've owned several bars and restaurants over the years. I've been consulting in the industry for over 20 years now, and that at all small business. But obviously, my background, my bailiwick's been predominantly in bars and restaurants, and I still to this day that's the one I miss.
Well, I'll tell you, I want to share this with you because we haven't talked in a long time, but I was teaching bar management at a certain, I'm not going to mention the school if we don't have the permission to do that, but anyway, it was a certain school in town, taught bartending, bar flair, and bar management, and you taught me several lessons that, about bar arrangement and pool tables that I've never forgotten, and I got a chance to pass that on to my students. It was a good learning experience. Awesome. Yeah, so I actually, brother, I got that from you, and I appreciate that, and I want to recognize you for that.
And I really appreciate you sharing it with me.
Well, no, I only ended up teaching about another year or so. I find when you have the ex-military, ex-first responder attitude, sometimes they don't understand the teaching technique. But my students love me that were there. Yeah. But the school that I was teaching for ran into some financial issues, and they closed the West Campus, which was where I was at. I was driving clear out there to teach, and I enjoyed it immensely. But there was numerous things you taught me. I think my two, other than what I learned just already to that, was from either you or John Tapper from Bar Rescue, but I'll be honest with you, you've taught me several things, and I've never forgotten that. I've always appreciated that. Let's switch.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate
no problem. I want to recognize you for that.
You mentioned John Tapper, so whenever I describe what I do, people will be like, "Oh, so you're like John Tapper." I'm like, well, I'm like John Tapper in the respect that maybe I'm in the minor leagues of baseball and he's Babe Ruth.
Well, I always
he played the same sport, but I clearly not on John Tapper's level. But I am very good at what I do, and I do it here locally. And I have a deep affection for mom and pop businesses. And
they're fun to be in. Let's face it. I mean,
well, entrepreneurial spirit. I like to support others.
Sure. And
so,
I've always told people it's kind of a funny thing because now I have a different version of that. Some people, when I used to do asset recovery, people go, "Oh, you're like Dog, the bounty hunter." No. Dog is not a real bounty hunter. He's a felon that I come unglued. I have this little soapbox speech. And I go, "No, that's not what I do." And I used to drive me insane when people say that. But in a Tapper, I would take that as a compliment. Well,
I tremendously, John. He is.
I love to watch him. It's just fun to watch, and the science behind it is very interesting. Now, let's talk a minute about.
I was, how for the show they gotta flare up the show a little bit, so he yells.
Well, yes, yeah.
Everybody's like, "Oh, you do that too," because everybody just assumes because they know my personality.
Sure.
I was a drill sergeant in the Army. I can be loud, and it just. I said, I have never yelled at one of my clients ever.
Yeah.
There's a time and a place for everything, and if I'm to the point where I got to yell at a client, I'm done. I just fired that client. I'm out.
Exactly. That's the end of it right there.
I always tell people I don't drown horses. I will lead you to water. I will show you how to drink it. But if you're not going to drink it, not my monkeys, not my circus.
Exactly. I've always, a lot of people, all the years I've been a fire chief, a lot of people say, well, you've got a bit of a, abrasive nature. And I go, well, I'm sorry, but, the truth is the truth.
I've never been accused of being abrasive ever. I just had a conversation with a good friend of mine the other day. He's down here in Johnson County.
Uh-huh.
He lives in Franklin, and he is running for county council at large. He's a recently retired colonel, Special Forces, Green Beret. And he's like, I love having you around. You're like that grizzled, that senior enlisted guy to, keep everybody in line with the lack of tact. And
you can't beat having a master chief or senior chief or, it's indispensable. And Heather can relate a little bit to that. Now, she's ex-Army. She 88M, and she's listening. Yep. She hadn't commented a whole lot yet, but you and I know each other. We're both brothers in the Masonic fraternity, so easier for us to relate. Let's talk a minute about the bar's paranormal end of it. Now, what did you witness, and what have you been told that has went on there?
Okay, let me preface this for all the folks listening. I have never been somebody that really bought into. They say that some people can feel, some people can dial into it, some people can't. If that's the case, I'm not one that can dial into it. But
you're like me. I always, ask my ex-wives. They all claimed I was insensitive anyway. So it just is what it is. I don't get it.
I have an innate ability to read people to the point where it's damn near clairvoyant at times.
Yes.
But that's just something that, my radio frequency doesn't pick up on if it exists.
Sure.
However, there are just some things that are undeniable.
Mm-hmm.
So I had two experiences personally that were inarguable, that I cannot explain away.
Yes.
Whatsoever. So I used to tell people all the time, they're like, "You believe in ghosts?" I'm like, "Well, the Holy Ghost."
There you go.
And I do know there was somebody murdered in there at one point, and I could, if we had access, I could show you on the floor over by the old Brunswick wooden walk-in cooler.
Yes.
There's a deterioration. I may have showed you back in. There's a deterioration.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
In the concrete where they threw lye on a guy and tried to make it dispose of him there way back in the day. However, you would think so, okay, negative haunting and everything. The spirits there were not negative.
Yes.
Nothing negative ever happened there. I feel like they guarded the place. I think they were so excited and appreciative that we restored it to its glory before it closed. It's a church now, believe it or not.
Oh, no kidding? Is that what's in there now? Is a church?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think they respected and appreciated the fact that we brought it back, because I think they were there because that's where they had some of their happiest times of their life. I don't think they were there for negative reasons. I think they may have been there for positive reasons, if I was to speculate their existence at all. So, my two instances.
Okay.
First one was, now, you marry that place, not in a good neighborhood, so it had some significant. It had some significant security aspects to it.
Sure.
Even when I bought it, that thing at night locked up like a steel drum.
Yes.
Okay. Doors, all the doors had triple locks on them, everything. And all the doors had locks from the inside, bolt locks, everything, that it is impossible to open those doors from the outside. That it's not set up that way. You can't pick a lock or anything. There are latches on the inside and bars. And with one way in and out at night when you locked up, that you had to lock up with a key, and it literally had 3 keyed locks, which is a pain in the butt because they were all keyed separate. And anyway, so because I live down in Franklin,
yes,
and I do most of my business in my office was huge downstairs, so I immediately put in a couch down there, and there were nights that I would just sleep there, wake up, and go the next morning and go right to work. So
sure,
in the very beginning, when we had it, I would, I had a lot going on with business up in Indy with all the other things I do.
Yes.
But I'm also trying to remodel this thing, so I'd stay late fixing it, so it'd be very late. So I just crash there, wake up, the apartment's upstairs, I can clean up, boom, 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 and go, and do my thing. Well, so I'm all locked in there. I locked that place down.
Yes.
It was. I remember. I can't remember what weeknight. It was a slow weeknight. There might have been 2 or 3 customers in there. Mind you, the bar still sucks at this point. The walls were peach.
Yes.
Because the previous owner got the paint on special, and after she caught it on fire, I mean, it was so. But I locked it down tighter than a drum. It's probably, 11 o'clock ish. So the fact that the bar is already closed at 11 tells you what popping. And I'm down in my office.
Okay.
And for your listening audience, I retired after 20-some years in the military. I was a contractor, governmental contractor overseas with the Department of Defense, Department of State, everything. I know lots of guys that shoot guns. And we just had, the weekend prior to that, we just had a collection.
Brian? Are you still there? Brian, did I lose you?
I'm right here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, anyway, we had a collection of guys come in. We all converged. A friend of ours owns a rifle range down in Connorsville, Indiana.
Wow.
We called it Shadow Spear Shootout. Brought in about 30 former been there, done that guys, and we just everybody brought their guns and everything, and so everybody just had a blast. Shooting all their guns, everything. We literally camped out and slept on the range with a big fire, and then the next day, but we all left. But the night before, when everybody was flying in, everybody converged on my bar.
Sure.
And I literally let guys crash there that night. I had guys sleeping on pool tables and stuff, because we're not really open like we should be at that point anyway. I wasn't open, and I believe it was a Monday. We're not open on Monday.
I've been a few of those that would call shrine parties. Yeah. I've been a few military parties that way.
Yeah. Well, save some money on hotels. And these are a bunch of guys that have slept on sides of mountains in third world countries. They don't care.
Sure.
So anyway, mind you, I left from there and I had to come directly back there. So long story short, it's already too late. I had quite a few of my guns in the basement.
Yes.
So I'm sitting down there. I think I'm just going over some paperwork at my desk. I remember I was sitting in my desk, and all of a sudden I hear 3 distinctive, hard-running footsteps directly above my head. Boom, boom, boom. Like somebody jumped off something running.
Sure.
It was like on the floor, not a wall up there, on the floor. It was 100% footsteps.
Yes.
And that thing had these beautiful old hardwoods that echoed, so I knew what it was.
Yes.
So I immediately grabbed my M4 and went upstairs because I know I locked that place down like Fort Knox. So I'm assuming somebody somehow hid in there till after closing. And thought that they not knowing that I was going to stay,
plausible.
Didn't know I was down there, was going to try to rob the place and then get out. So I go upstairs fully expecting to encounter somebody.
Yes.
And And I cleared that place 3 times. There was nobody in there.
And there's a lot of cubby holes there. I mean, places people could take hiding easy.
I looked in the freezer to see if somebody was hiding. And I'm not talking the walk-in freezer. I'm talking about the chest freezer. I checked in the cabinets under the sink, which you couldn't get half a person in there. You couldn't get a 5-year-old in there. I looked everywhere over. I was stumped. So I called a friend of mine who was a local police officer who was on duty. He came over. He went through the whole place with me. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I think he thought I was batshit crazy. But he's like, they probably beat on the door. I'm telling you, I know what I heard. Beating on the door doesn't cause a little bit of dust to come up in the basement.
Exactly.
Never. So I'm like, what the heck was that? Anyway, that was my first one that it gave me pause. Like, what's going on? I was starting to hear all the stories from the neighborhood and blah, 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 blah. And everybody thinks that everything old is haunted.
Yes.
And so, okay. I just kind of put it in the back of my head and dismissed it. So fast forward, that was in like the first month of me owning it.
Okay.
Fast forward, 3 months in, we have our big, hey, we don't suck anymore party.
Yeah.
Blow the place out. Place is packed beyond capacity. Everything is just a great party. Well, remember what I said earlier?
Sure.
You could smoke in there back then. Still.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So, and if you remember that big, beautiful African mahogany Brunswick back bar that was
it was beautiful. Yes.
Mirror.
Pillars on the ends.
And if
yes.
you ever want to see that, I sold that to a client of mine who she's got it in her place on the square in Salem. So at any rate, me and my GM are the last ones there. Everybody's bolted. My partner left. Everybody's gone, and we're looking at this place. It has to be cleaned up, and I don't have anybody do anything that I won't do. So I'm gonna help clean up. But we looked at it. I'm like, look, brother, I'm starved. It's 4 a.m.
Yes.
Let's go eat. Right. Let's go over to that greasy spoon that used to be over there, Peppy Grill. Which
brother from my lodge owned that. Him and his wife. Wife was the Eastern Star. But damn, I don't know how many times me and Ed ate there. That was a good place.
I was like, let's go get some steak and eggs, and then we'll come back and get started on this. And he's like, absolutely. So we went over there, but before I left, I noted it because I had cleaned that mirror meticulously myself.
Yes.
Because it was years of built up stuff. So that was like a big thing that we cleaned that so many times to get all the years and years of tobacco off of it.
Yes.
So this thing is a sparkling clean when we started that evening. It is so covered in smoke that I literally walked over and I drew a happy face. I licked my finger and drew a happy face in the smoke all over the mirror. You distinctively see a happy face in there. And he just kind of laughed, so we leave. We come back. We took our time. It was right around. We come back about an hour later.
Yes.
Okay? Now, mind you, we locked that place up. Locked it up.
Yes.
We come back, open the door, like, yep, there's the mess we left. Ugh. So we kicked all the lights on. Not just the regular lights, because we had like red lights in there to keep it.
Yes.
We kicked on the last call, get the hell out lights.
Yes.
The big bright white ones that are up there.
Oh, yes.
And we both look over. Chief, that mirror was spotless.
Whoa.
I looked at him. He looked at me. And am I allowed to cuss on your podcast?
Yeah. We don't. Yeah, we don't put any limits. Yeah.
We both simultaneously said, "What the fuck?"
Yes.
And I'm like, we're out. And we left, locked the door behind us, and said, we'll clean up tomorrow.
Well, yeah, that's one of those moments you got to think about.
We were like, what the hell? But we came back the next day.
Mm-hmm.
Mirror's still clean as hell. We cleaned the place up.
Yes.
I personally never witnessed anything like that, but also, if you remember, I took the tractor went overseas to Afghanistan for like a year. My GM ran it, she would always tell. I get daily reports from her, and she was dialed into that kind of stuff.
Sure.
We had some paranormal people come in through the night and listen and set up all this stuff.
Yes.
I was in Afghanistan at the time. Like, they asked permission. I said, well, she's willing to stay there. Have at it. And
Sure.
She was all into it. She's like, absolutely.
Yes.
Rest her soul. She's passed now.
Oh, I didn't know that. Did she? She was nice.
About 10 years ago,
wow.
cancer got her. So at any rate, they did that, and they said they heard all this stuff, but I never really witnessed anything in there again, but I didn't need to. That was enough.
Sure.
I to this day, it's been how many years, ago, and
Yes.
I have never found a feasible remote thing that could dismiss that out of my head. There's no way, because I know how long it took to clean that mirror. That's a big ass mirror.
Well, it usually takes. I always tell people when we're dealing. People always ask me, "What does it take to transfer a skeptic into a believer?" And I said, one incident. It has to be one instant. I on the podcast, I've told many times of different incidents, but it takes one, and we always laugh because when we were as we've investigated over 30 years and things, and Ed always said the ghosts were afraid of me. He says, you look like an asshole, and they just don't want to deal with you. And so,
maybe that was me.
I don't know. That's why I wonder if you got the same complex I did. I only had one incident in my entire life. It was in a apartment complex in Cumberland, and a shadow figure stepped right out in front of me, and it was so alarming. I remember I yelled out, "Oh, Jesus," real loud, and I jumped back, and it just disappeared. Well, my tech manager at the time for the next 2 years made that audio clip his ringer tone for me on his phone because he couldn't believe I actually got a DDR. But
That's hilarious.
I just never did see much. I'm like you. I mean, all the years I've been parapsychology, I've never got to witness very much, and we always just kind of wrote it off on Ed's solution that they were scared of me. But honestly, I remember talking to her before she passed, and one of the things that she told me was a shadow figure that she saw one time in the bar, and she always thought kind of in her mind it was more like Al Capone because it was wearing a hat, and it wasn't unusual.
It was probably somebody of that era.
Somebody of that era, exactly.
Of all the places Al Capone, I guarantee the Vollrath was low on his list.
Exactly. And even it's like somebody said, "Well, do you think he still haunts the Rock?" Why would you haunt a prison you were in? I mean, that's just stupid.
Unless you were ordered to pay penance of some sort in the
exactly.
afterlife. And that's my point. Everybody that was happy. I think if that actually occurs,
yes.
I don't understand all that, but if you have your choice of where you're going to go with good memories, not bad.
Exactly. And
why would you haunt somebody that's in a building now that had nothing to do with whatever pain or something you had? I mean, you're going to move on to happiness.
Well, and I always laugh and say that when I go, I've got a list of names of those I intend to visit.
Yeah.
But you and I are cut for some of the same cloth in a lot of ways, and it makes a difference sometimes. You go places that are happy, not places that you don't want to visit again. But well, and I tell you what, that is fantastic. The history you give has been more, and I really like the story about the former police officer, because a lot of times people don't realize the best stories are caught by those who have never recorded them. People that seen them.
Yeah.
I actually got to talk to old man Klaus, who owns Klaus Meats, a long time ago. And
yeah, I remember him.
Yeah, remember him? Yeah, and
yeah.
he actually told me he used to eat breakfast there, and I said, well, were they serving alcohol? And he said, no, it was against the law at the time, and he just kind of winked at me. And,
Yeah.
And so, I look back on that.
Behind the bar.
Yes.
Directly behind the bar, if you remember, there's an old dumbwaiter that things went up.
Oh, yeah, I remember you showing that to me. Yeah, where they brought the liquor up, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think back in the day, obviously, they used the heck out of that.
Oh,
and then
yeah.
The hallways, the tunnels. And then I found there was a spot in there that clearly was a door in the basement. Yes. That's all been all sealed up, stoned up. But if you were to... But you go upstairs, like, that leads directly under that back parking lot. There's nowhere. There's no law. It's at the edge of
going to the church, you think?
No, I went out the back.
Oh, out the back. Okay.
Out towards the back, because there was rumors that somehow it was once connected to the church underground. I don't think that's actually true. However, It did go. It went out the back. Well,
sure.
There was heavy rains or something, and I think from the cars parking on the blacktop there, right before I moved out of there.
Yes.
That thing fell in.
Oh, really?
Yes, that thing fell in, and it was loaded with sand.
So this was going toward the rail yard?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was just loaded with sand. Sand just poured out of it in the old boiler room, where the boiler had been long since gone.
Yes.
They took it off boiler heat. Well, the old boiler was there, but it was all decommissioned, cut off, and everything.
Sure. Yeah, because I don't remember seeing that. I don't remember us seeing that. Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks to the Patriot Act, Indiana Homeland Security had to inspect the boiler once a year.
Sure.
This is ridiculous. Like, we'll take a picture of it. You can tell that it's done.
Oh yeah. Oh
it doesn't even have a door on it anymore. It's wide open.
Yeah, exactly. Decommissioned to no end.
Sand just poured in, blah blah blah. So it had to be repaired, put back, But
yes.
you couldn't see where. And I'm like, I'm not digging up under that parking lot.
No, I don't blame you there. Well, now, so now a church owns this now?
They leased the spot
from
the current owners. The building's changed hands a few times.
I knew it was a catering thing for a while, and that's all I kept up on.
Yep. Catering for a while, then some real estate development guys had it, some offices in it. There was a gaming place in there, like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, that leased it for a while. And you remember that beautiful slate floor I put in there?
Oh yeah, beautiful at that. Yes.
I went in there less than a year after I left the building and everything for the last time. I popped in there, tried I had the gaming thing in there, and the owners had put down like a floating Formica floor over it. I'm like, good Lord.
Yeah.
Over the old hardwoods I restored as well.
Yes.
Good Lord. But, to each their own.
Sure.
I wish I hadn't walked in there now. I seen it that way. I will tell you this. When I left for the last time, and I locked the door to walk out of it, it's all done. I moved everything out.
Yes.
I'm done. I did look around one last time. It's like a scene from a bad B movie. I looked around, and I just simply said, thanks, guys, and I left.
Yeah. Well, that's a good way to depart on it. Now,
there were so many amazing musicians that played in there while I had that place, and just
didn't you had Duke Tomato in there one time, didn't you?
Yep.
I remember that. I remember. Yeah, there was a lot. Yes.
Yeah, we had quite a few, because we would have the best Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday shows, because we weren't a huge venue.
Sure.
But Indianapolis is not a major music stop.
No,
so you got
it is
bands
not.
that were traveling for from Chicago to Nashville. So
yes,
they would, where they're playing weekend shows, they would just set up quick shows at our place en route for gas money. And then the word got out that we were just this really cool, because the sound that came out of there with the exposed studs, ceiling and everything.
Yes.
We had multiple bands record live in there when we were closed, because the sound that
sure.
was so loud.
Acoustically, they wanted that.
Well, it became the spot that you had, even though it's a smaller venue, it wasn't cool unless you played it. So we had all these guys that we should have never booked or booking in there for next to nothing compared to making these big venues. They're like, what are we doing? We're traveling here to there. We got nothing to do on the way. We're going to hang out. And then they'd play. Then they'd hang out and drink beer with us and, and socialize with their fans. It was really, so, again, it added to that cool vibe. We had some far bigger acts and amazing artists play there than one might think. So,
let me ask you this now. I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna ask you something that kind of changes where we're going here. Do you know much about the Gaslight or any of its past? I know it was close to the
friend of mine. A friend of mine. I'll be happy to hook you up with him. He was the last owner of that place.
Oh, I would love to talk to him if at all possible. That would be fabulous.
Joe DeMore, great guy.
Yes.
He's still in the industry. He gave it a go. He restored it, everything, but it didn't take off.
Thank you, Brian Alvey, for that wonderful interview. We're back, folks, and we're going to turn our attentions now toward the Gaslight Inn, which was another bar located right off of Meridian Street. Another bar that was frequented by, our two patrons.
Dillinger and Capone.
Yes, sirree.
And of course, why did they do that?
Yeah.
Because they were speakeasies,
That's right. And they were catering to them because they had ways out.
Well, small neighborhood bars where they could lay low and.
And these were guys, one of two reasons you didn't turn them in. One was either like in Dillinger's case, he was kind of a folk legend, or it could be somewhat like in Capone's case, where you turn him in,
Capone.
you don't want to cross.
You don't want to cross Capone
because that wouldn't end well for you. I mean, you just would not, and you knew that.
So it looks like the Gaslight Inn is older than the Vollrath. It looks like it was built in 1920.
Mm-hmm.
And so while we were listening to Brian there, I pulled up the maps because this is the one quadrant of Indianapolis that I don't know like the back of my hand.
See, I ran this when I was a kid, and I was kind of on the south side, and my lodge is down there. So
Right, yeah. So looked at it, and so this is south of where the Vollrath was.
Yes.
And so South Meridian, near Garfield Park.
Yes,
and
actually right across the street from it, yeah.
And I guess it is surrounded by cemeteries containing 50,000 known graves.
Yes.
Right? I got the number right. 50,000?
Yes, and this is I hate to say this, but this is one of the areas that has the largest population of the dead there is. I mean, you've got 2 or 3 cemeteries all right there.
It does seem like there's a lot of cemetery park down there.
There is a lot.
Yeah.
And they're still active. One of them is ran by the Catholic Church. The other 2 have connections.
It was Jewish?
Jewish is one, but the other one has some connections to, I think, the Protestant or Presbyterians.
Okay.
It's an area, but, that was kind of a melting pot area.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. That area was one that, had a lot of folks from a lot of different areas and a lot of different religions and, and a lot of different nationalities. You mostly had Germans and Irish, but there was a few Polish in that area. And, this is going back in the old days. So, I mean, certainly things were different then.
Well, things were quite different. I mean, you had Prohibition happening, but even before then, in a 1902 article in the India Star, 4 men are arrested for digging up corpses in the nearby Washington Park cemeteries. And I guess they sold these limbs of the corpses to doctors. And the article alleged that John may have been involved in this by operating a makeshift mortuary in the basement where he cut up the bones.
Yeah.
Now, who's John? John would be John Dransfield. And he owned the Gaslight for over 40 years. I guess he was a very tall, physically imposing specimen.
Yes.
6'7".
Yes.
And I guess he tended to scare his patrons just by appearing hostile. I think anybody that large and imposing is going to be
it's going to be intimidating to no end. Yes. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, if he's going to be your front man for a little body snatching.
Yeah. Well, and, this goes back. We talked about the Indy 11 and the Green Lawn Cemetery, and they were stealing bodies out of there. Oh yeah, I saw that this morning. Yes, for those we'll probably have to do an updated. We probably going to need to be here eventually doing an updated.
Well, who knows what's going to happen now?
Oh no, yeah, because right now with the mayor,
I mean, and I may be understanding that wrong, but I think the city pulled their funding out.
They did. They're looking at a spot that's the heliport. They're wanting to remove the heliport and put it there where the heliport's at.
Right.
And they're wanting to break off and say, let's bring another MLS team in. Yeah, and then, they're abandoning, for all practical purposes,
but I thought the Indy 11 was supposed to be our gateway into an MLS.
Well, that was the idea. They were supposed to be the ones that were going to do this. And then,
right?
Yeah, so
that's
now
why
it's
we were building them a stadium.
Yeah, right. And then you've got to, the problem is now you got 3 warring factors down there.
Yeah,
because some of the people are upset, and they brought the archaeology and anthropology group in, which are removed, and they've done tons of research. They're finding out who these bodies are. They're hoping.
And don't tell me the city didn't know this was going to happen. The city knew this was going to happen. The city knew this was there.
Yeah. They knew it because Diamond Chain had this problem.
All knew that it was there.
Yeah, and they knew what happened. They just turned a blind eye, and they thought, it wasn't going to be as bad. I think that's the reason that the mayor wants to pull out, because he knows...
He didn't realize just how bad it was going to get.
How widespread and how many bodies were being found. I mean, virtually...
This is big.
Yeah, less than half the bodies, I think, have been moved, so half of them are still there, and they're still digging them up. Right. And they just, so he thinks this is going to greatly impede... He said this morning on the news, it's going to greatly impede the ability of them getting that off the ground. So he's changing the ground. He's got another backer now, a financial backer, because he's been dealing straight with MLS.
I think that's really poor. I think the city had a really big opportunity here to honor and give those people who were never moved the proper memorial that they deserve, and incorporate it into our Indy 11 and our future
they could
MLS
put plaques
team.
there. I mean, there could be a lot. The bad thing is,
give the history
and this
of the
reminds
area.
me of the deal with the Baltimore Colts that became the Indianapolis Colts. Now, I'm not a sports fan. Everybody knows I don't listen to sports.
No, you don't.
No, I don't. I listen to golf and I listen to curling. It's not like I have a lot.
You had a conversation with Drew Brees on the sideline and had no idea who he was.
I had no idea, and I kept
Mr. Sunday on the Saturday. Mr.
Yeah,
Saturday.
we discussed Dyson hand blowers for the most part of the trip. Yes, I mean,
on the airplane,
I
didn't know who he was. Everybody was laughing.
I've had this happen before. I've met a lot of famous people that I didn't really know were famous. Anyway, but I remember as a kid when that midnight run when they went in and took all their stuff out and they moved out of Baltimore and Hudnut was behind that. And there was a lot of hard feelings for quite some time.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like it healed in a matter of a few years.
No, and this could have the potential to be the same.
Same potential.
And the interesting thing is there is a historic building there in the property where
that's the third faction in this whole mess. Yeah.
She is a supporter of the Indy 11.
Yeah.
She is a supporter.
She said she ain't getting it.
She ain't selling it.
You
ain't getting it from me.
Now, as of this morning, there's a fourth problem.
Oh, no.
It turns out that Simon Group had made arrangements to buy parking for a facility there. The deal was already in the works, and now the mayor wants to renege on it because that also, the new building would have to go in that area. And they looked around and says, oh, no, I'm sorry. This was already began long before this whole Indy 11 thing came along. It's our lot, and we're going to keep it. And so now he's got a mess all over the board.
I don't mind having an MLS team. I really don't.
I don't care one way or another.
I enjoy sports. I'm not a rabid fanatic, but I enjoy them.
Yes.
But I also enjoy our amateur leagues more. And I really do.
I mean, they serve their purpose.
We're the amateur sports capital.
Yes.
And I think that we need to honor that. And this is
I think it's just
not
the wrong thing to do to Indy 11. I mean,
I really do think it was
I'm not a soccer fan. I don't think I've ever watched. I mean, the most of a soccer game I watched was some films of Pele, so I knew who he was. Other than that, no, I really haven't. But still, this whole deal went wrong. It was bad. It really was. So I think that, and certainly the people at Green Lawn are starting to see that. So, I think we're looking at the same kind of deal here. It's going to happen. It's going to be a problem. But, the body snatching that went on at Green Lawn is what you're seing here. It's the same time.
Yeah,
it's
the same time period.
They're still selling it to the same people, the Indianapolis physicians, and they were, they're college. So, it's the same thing we covered in that episode. So you got people that are stealing bodies out of here, left and right, and they're chopping up in the basement. So, and people go, well, who haunts it? Well, who doesn't? I mean, my God, there's a myriad of things involved here.
There's so much going on.
Yeah.
I mean, before it closed, the patrons were reported feeling touched and watched.
Yes.
They were even being scratched. We didn't hear about that at the Vollrath.
No. Now, I will say, though, and I think Brian brings this up in his, a lot of women got groped at the Vollrath down the lower station.
Well,
but, I mean, that's a get me kind of thing.
That's kind of, that's not a scratch.
Yeah, that's not a scratch.
That's not a scratch. Sounds of voices and gunshots and breaking glass. Shadow figures are seen in full apparitions adorned in early 20th century clothing.
Yes.
I guess investigations, which you'll need to tell me more about. Sightings of a girl and a woman?
There was a girl and a woman and a male figure in the basement. Not much is known about the woman, but the girl and the men are quite well known, actually.
Right.
The girl is named Heather. Oddly enough, Heather. Yeah.
Hey.
Oh.
Yeah, and she appears to have been about 4 or 5 foot at the time of her death.
No,
4 or 5 age. I'm sorry, the time of her death. Based on on her clothing, that is, it's believed that she passed away sometime in the 30s. And again, this is based on her clothing. She has been sighted wearing a pink dress, black shoes, white anklet socks, and pink bow in her hair. Now, I'm not an anthropologist, but I would say that can go a lot more than the 30s. I mean, I remember my kids wearing black shoes.
To
and
me, that
my girls,
sounded 1950s.
Yeah. I'm thinking, I'm like you. I'm thinking that's more 50s.
At least that's what I'm picturing in my head. But
well,
who knows?
there was a big thing.
It all depends on the style of the dress.
Exactly, Heather. Exactly.
Yeah. And the bow. If the bow was great, big, and huge, that's more like the 30s. If it was a small bow or medium-sized bow, that's like the 50s, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, a nice big bow, and if it's a sort of a straight A line, then it could even be early 20s.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a lot of area of latitude there.
Yeah,
she was described as being very playful. She was seen on all 3 floors and liked to touch the hands and wrists of the guests, which I'm sure quite alarming. The man's name is John. He is believed to be the longtime owner we talked about, John Dransfield. He owned the Gaslight for over 40 years. He was imposing, as you said, he was very tall. And during this period of time, not only did we have the allegation of the body snatching and dismemberment for the purpose of the Indianapolis Physician Society, but also they were producing liquor there, which one of the easiest liquors to produce was bathtub gin.
Right.
Which
Everybody's favorite.
Yep. And the bad thing is, and I can tell you this because, when they started making it legal, everybody could own stills. One of the first things they did was buy a still. And one of the first things they tell you is, if you don't get it right, you can go blind really fast. You need to,
die.
Or die, yeah. And so this is a warning you get, and you're thinking, okay. And the whole art of distillation is an art. Let me tell you what, it really is. Anybody can make alcohol, it won't kill you, but to make it palatable to drink is different. But a lot of people during Prohibition turned to their bathtubs and making their own distillation chambers in the basements. Yeah. There's a Disney movie, and I can't remember the name of it.
Disney movie?
It's actually a Disney movie. It's about, I was trying to remember, it was about this...
a still?
No, well, it has one in it. Yeah, it actually does. Yeah, it's this guy, I was trying to remember, it wasn't Freaky Friday, but it had the same gentleman that appeared in Blackbeard's Ghost, and he was helping out this church, and his
Heather, Google.
Yeah, this ought to be pretty good if you find. Anyway, the church, the caretaker and him ran a still in the basement, and they blew it up. And it was in one of the churches. Maybe Shaggy DA. I think it might be Shaggy DA, but I remember it distinctly. He blew up the still in the basement. And so, now, this wasn't during Prohibition. This was probably 40s and 50s. But still, the art to make this came from Prohibition. I mean, a lot of people, especially in the military, a lot of people in Korea, and we've seen in MASH, one of the big things in MASH was, Hawkeye and Pierce's still. They had a gin still.
Well, I mean, people have been distilling rye.
Oh, yeah.
Back through the ages.
Well, and one of the easiest things to distill is gin, honestly. Now when you start getting into bourbons and American whiskeys, and that's where you start getting into, mash. You have to make 3 weeks ahead of time.
Wrong divergence here.
Oh, didn't we? Yeah. I don't want to start teaching you about mixology here. So, but anyway, there is I'm pretty sure it's either Shaggy DA. It had the same guy from Shaggy DA in it.
That character actor that was famous in all of those.
Yes, and I can't think of his name. Herbie was in Herbie, and he plays in it. His offshoot brother or uncle or something gets with this guy that lives in the basement of the church who's a caretaker, and they end up blowing it up because they got a still down there. And it's like a Protestant or Presbyterian church, so it's not one that's really accustomed to liquor. But anyway, bathtub, we'll get back. Heather's looking for that right now. Bathtub gin was one of the more common products, and he did make quite a bit of it there. According to a 1902 article, we talked about that, about the corpse that were being dug up, and about him possibly. So he was trying to make money at the time any way he could. If it was selling body parts, if it was selling gin, I mean, he was moving on. So, and now, one thing we'll get back to, start talking about, it could be the victims could be hunting it.
Right.
Some of the patrons. No telling who else could have died there unregistered.
I mean, this seems a little bit more volatile.
More macabre. Yeah. Much more than the and I'm not going to say, because, first of all, I'm not Catholic. I know you were raised Catholic.
Right, yeah.
Catholicism sometimes does have a little more money and a little more couth, I would say, or at least a little more fascade to keep it quiet than some of the Protestants did at the time. So, maybe the Presbyterians in that area just wasn't working out. But either way, John was making money. And one of the haunts, a former kitchen manager, was on record saying that she was going down the basement one day to get a restock of alcohol, which, the bad thing is, that's why they have bar backs. A lot of people don't realize bartenders have bar backs. It kept their hips and backs in good shape. That's why they call them bar backs, because they use their back to bring all the heavy liquor up from the basement and get it up for the bartender to put away and serve. The job of the bartender was to serve the alcohol. The bar back was to carry up the beer, carry up the liquor, sometimes cut up the fruit into garnishes. It was all the jobs to keep the mixologist or the head bartender free. And so, anyway, getting back here, she was going down the basement to restock the alcohol. As descending the stairs, his body froze and could not move. He called for help. Now, this is the kitchen manager of the current owner and his wife, who was waiting on his shift to end. The owner, Mr. Demore, came to his aid. He attempted to move him by pulling his torso. There was a great resistance that was unexplained before he finally was able to move. So he was
frozen.
He was frozen in the spot,
and they couldn't get him to move.
No, even when they manually tried to move him, he did not move.
Wow.
So, so the Gaslight has a bit more macabre background, I would say, than the Vollrath.
Yeah.
I'd love to know who's got it now. I mean, I know it's for sale, but, that area, I mean, CK's bar was for sale for a long time across from St. Roch, and I know I performed a wedding service in there many, many years ago, drank in there several times. Used to, one of the best things in the world, every Thursday they had all-you-could-eat wings for a quarter a wing, and it was great. I'd go in there on Thursdays. It was inexpensive. I could eat dinner there. But that area is changing. As that area changes, the places for small neighborhood bars are going away. And, it just, and Heather is still looking for this. Any luck?
No.
I know that the actor's name is Fred McMurray.
Yeah, that's it. Fred McMurray. Well, God, he was there forever and did a great job. I remember... God, I'm thinking back. There was one where they were in
There's one called The Absent-Minded Professor.
Nope, that isn't it. I know. That's definitely not it.
An absent-minded professor is going to blow up his chemistry.
I think he was. Yeah, and there was it in Flubber, and that was either one of those two. This one,
he played in both.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was in both. This was a color film, and actually, I believe it had something to do with 8th Street Irregulars. That sound right? 8th Street, 6th Street Irregulars.
I don't know. We'll pull up a list of his movies.
Yeah, pull up a list of his movies, and let's see if there's something about Dillinger. But anyway, getting back to the Gaslight, there's so many potential for hauntings there. It isn't funny. There was times where the bar would have glasses that moved on it while patrons in full sight. Noises, knocks. A lot of times the knocks were very interactive. You could ask questions, get them to interact. For a long time, good friends of ours who retired, Mary and Sean, who ran Paranormal 911, kind of camped out there for a while. They made a deal with the owner, and they had Paranormal Fridays. And if you came down on Friday, they would do show you some of the things they captured the week before, some of the evidence and data they gathered. They'd talk about more. They'd teach you little things about different and then that evening, they would take people to the basement and do a little bit of an investigation and come back up.
That's cool.
Yeah, it lasted for a while, and they made a go at it, and then it ended. But they had a lot of activity, and the same thing. It was a very interactive activity. Now, I'm sure we were talking about Vollrath, and I think it's easy to say these could be 50-50. 50% really could be 50% residual and 50% intelligent. I think it could go both ways.
Okay.
I think there's a lot involved there. Now, John's ghost returning? Yeah, I could see that. I remember.
Oh, I definitely could see that.
Yeah, very sweet lady, and she's a groomer. They used to own a shop in Cumberland. She closed it, moved it to her house. But her father was in the Shrine with me, and he used to own the Butler Inn. Owned it for years. I remember right after he sold it, she was joking and said he used to spend all of his life there. Now he spends even more that he sold it. And he sold it to another Shriner. It didn't make a run at it. It ended 2 or 3 years after he sold it, it closed. But she always said if he died, he'd go back and hang out at the Butler. And, old bar on Washington Street. As part of the Highlanders, we used to hit it every St. Patrick's Day. So, but anyway, and I really think it's something called, it was like a detective thing. He played a detective. I think it was called the 5th Street Irregulars. But I don't know if that was it or not. Anyway, we're still searching for that. If you know the answer to that question, you're more than welcome to reach out to us and post it. We're probably going to find it here shortly, I would hope. But anyway, it's a 60s movie, probably 70s it came out.
I don't know. Fred McMurray made a lot of movies.
Yeah, yes, he did. Oh, my God, he did.
He made a lot of movies.
That darn Cat from Outer Space. But I was trying to think if I could come up with anything else in my head.
I don't know. Follow me, boys.
Nope, that wasn't it. Okay. Keep looking. Let's see here. I was trying to think that I keep thinking something keeps coming back to Irregulars. North Avenue Irregulars.
Okay.
Just check that out and see. I think that's it. I think it's the North Avenue Irregulars. I believe what it was is, and that doesn't look like it. That looks like a non-Disney show.
Well, this is a tangent that really went far
Yeah, go
afield,
ahead.
didn't it?
Yes, yes, and there'll be people out there now looking and googling. It's like the East Side Irregulars or something. It was a. Did you get the list of the Murray movies?
Yes.
Okay, can you read a few of them, and I'll tell you. I remember them driving around town. It was like they were tracking something. I know they did that in That Darn Cat and the Cat from Outer Space. But there was...
Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah.
What you got?
There's Always Tomorrow.
Nope.
Far Horizons.
Nope. Now, these are Disney?
No.
Oh, look for the Disney. This was a Disney movie.
The only Disney ones was all Flubber and Absent-Minded Professor.
Nope, there was another couple he made.
Shaggy Dog.
It has to be either the Shaggy DA... I'm thinking it's the Shaggy DA.
Well, it's Shaggy Dog.
Okay, Shaggy Dog. What was the other ones he made?
Were there 2 Shaggy Dog movies?
There was. There was actually 3, I think. And I'm trying to... Okay, the Great Disney Movie Ride. And it's coming up the north. Did he star in one called the North Avenue Irregulars, 1979?
I don't know. Did this blow up become how he became the Shaggy Dog? Is that
No. I remember Snowball Express, and honestly, just a quick fact, that was the first movie I can remember as a child ever seeing was Snowball Express. It actually has Colonel Potter, the gentleman who plays in it. I
tell you what, guys, the first person to put in the name of the movie in the Facebook page.
Yeah. Yep. That might
You're
be...
going to win a special little surprise.
Yeah. We'll send something out special from Spirit if you put that in our Facebook page and tell us what that is.
Help us out, because this is going to drive us crazy.
Yeah, it will, because, these kind of things. But, I'm... Somehow, when I'm looking through this, it looks somewhat familiar, but I don't see him in it. Maybe I misled us by saying that Bill McMurray is in it. He isn't.
Oh, maybe not.
That might
Or
be...
Fred McMurray.
Fred McMurray, yes.
Not Bill Murray.
Not Bill Murray. God, yeah. Bill's upset. Yeah, no. Yeah, I remember this movie pretty well, and only in the fact I remember the church. That was the big thing, because, him and he had this goofy uncle cousin, something they were watching all the time. Every time they turn loose, he get in trouble. And he got into it with this caretaker, and next thing you know, you hear this giant explosion. And I think he actually plays the minister, if I remember straight.
The last movie he was in was 1978 in The Swarm.
Nope, that isn't it. Does it show where he played a pastor? Played a reverend? I'm thinking that...
I can see him playing a reverend, but I don't know if he did that often.
Boy, I don't know. And it was. I'm just gonna ask you. Look and see if you don't care, Jennifer. Look and see if you see Fred McMurray, Disney movie pastor, or reverend. Reverend probably better.
So did Tim ever join with the Friday nights at the Gaslight when he was with the group?
I don't know that he did. I don't think he was with the group at that time. They had a run-in with another gentleman, and he was. He ended up actually stealing our name for a while, and then they let go of it after there was court action involved. But I don't think Tim had come along at that time. It was toward the end. They went through, before they were at the Gaslight, they were in a place out east, and I can't remember what it was. They did paranormal evenings there. They went down into Irvington and was trying to get in the Irvington Theater, and the owner, there was a discrepancy there, and they were bounced out of there. And, I don't think it was anything they did. It's just that contract had ended. Right. And the last thing they went to was the Gaslight. And when they left it, I remember we went over to support them, knowing that we were friends. And they had done an investigation that made it onto one of the Haunted series. And it was a series we wouldn't do because they wouldn't recognize the group. And it was called My Hauntings or something. And they offered it to us several times. We turned them down. They went on it for investigating Cy Greens, which Jerry Maple at the time owned Cy Greens, and Jerry's a good brother, and I knew him. So anyway, we got in the middle, and he was doing Cy Green's. It was one of the owners participating, and it was on TV, and they aired it there at Cy Green's. We all went over and sat and watched it air at Cy Green's. And I'm going to say that was around 2013, 2014. They retired everything, I think, in around 16 or 17, and inevitably, Sean was a firefighter with IFD, Mary was a paramedic, and they both retired and moved to Florida. And that is where they're at now. So, I mean, Paranormal 911 was shut down thereafter. I didn't know a lot of the people on it other than Mary and Sean for my connection with the fire service. So, but that was about it. So, folks, I tell you what, if you can find out what this is, we gave you a lot of clues.
Because I'm...
Yeah, we all want to know.
Striking out here.
Send it in on our Facebook. We're going to be advertising. You'll see this in the advertisement. Post it, and let's see what we come up with, okay?
Let us know.
Well, folks, that's all that I have for this evening. We've talked, anybody want to add anything about the Vollrath or the Gaslight?
No, I wish I had been there before.
Yeah, I tell you, I think it was a really neat place. So, all right, so tonight's episode, we want to thank Eric Kerr, which he works under Jennifer as a research assistant, and he wrote this episode, both ends of it, and he helped talk and talk to Brian, and we want to thank Brian Alvey for his time, and we really appreciate that. So at this time, it is now time for the Ghost Story of the Day with Jennifer Verne.
Ghost Story of the Day is from A Ghost Today by Maureen Wood and Ron Kolick. Limp Mansion Restaurant and Inn, St. Louis, Missouri. If a recipe for hauntings includes suicides, then the Limp Mansion in St. Louis is guaranteed to be a souffle of the paranormal. The Limps, who were the first Americans to brew a lager beer, have seen their share of pain and misery. The Limp family lost 4 of its members to suicide, 3 of which took place within the mansion. Perhaps this could explain the plethora of paranormal activity that is witnessed by patrons of the restaurant and inn. Ragtime melodies play on an ethereal piano, drinks stir themselves, glasses are thrown through midair by some unseen force, and lights turn on and off by themselves. There are bouts of paranormal activity associated with the tragic history, or perhaps are the oddities surrounding the design of the building. When venturing into the basement of the mansion, you will find not only a swimming pool, but also an auditorium and ballroom that have been built into the structure of a natural cavern. And although now closed due to inherent danger, one tunnel once existed that led from the mansion directly to the brewery. Regardless of the reasons why, one thing is known for sure. The Limp Mansion has been listed as one of the most haunted places in America.
Thanks for listening to Ghost. Again, I'm your host, Chief Lawson. You can find Ghost on all major formats on the 15th and 30th of the month at midnight. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, maybe have a question or subject you'd like to ask about on air, or be used on the show, please email us at ghosttoghost@spiritindiana.com, ghosttoghost@spiritindiana.com. I want to thank my production staff on Spirit, Jennifer Verne, our research manager and our producer, and Heather Lawson, our trainer on Spirit and our podcast director, for helping make these podcasts possible. My chief of staff, Andrew Brooks, for his guidance and help on the scripts, and everyone else involved. Thank you so much. See you next time. Until then, stay safe and remember the truth is out there. Good night. Ghost to Ghost podcast and its contents is the property of Spirit Paranormal Ltd. All rights reserved. We welcome you to download and play the podcast and share with others for personal use. You may not, except with written permission, use or distribute its contents for commercial use. Spirit Indiana Paranormal, covering the Hoosier State since 2002, Indy's oldest parapsychology investigation group. If you're experiencing what you believe to be paranormal issues, reach out to us for help at www.spiritindiana.com or call our hotline at 317-883-9103. Again, that is www.spiritindiana.com or our hotline at 317-883-9103. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself and the ones you love, and be safe out there.